other day say how he thought the Earth's supposed elliptical sun orbit is a problem for the ball Earth model. Well, I agree, so I thought I would put a clip together here, and I hope you all enjoy.
Really? P-Brain listening to Owen Benjamin? Come on in, P-Brain. Tell us, what's the kicker?
Then here's the kicker. That would be a 2,000 mile per hour fluctuation in overall orbital speed every 12 hours. That's how you know the Earth's not spinning and it's not orbiting the sun.
Now, P-Brain, you said that Earth's orbital velocity changes by 2,000 miles an hour every 12 hours. Well, I hope you got some good evidence of that. You must have some good evidence of that. I'm going to need to up my game. Well, I think I will start with my sound.
Wow. Thank you, patrons. Really appreciate this. With massive thanks to all my patrons, including new patrons, Duranku, Critical Analysis, Justin Neal, Mark Adrisioko, John Tomchick, Paul M. Rowe, Tom C., Bjorn Kamitz, James Holman, Michael O'Quinn, Stromgall, Edwulf Sledgeverter, Opus One, Keith Morrill and Tim Boston, and my newest patrons, Alexander Henkel, Janie, Stephen Huxtable, Surf and Paul Reap. Thank you all very much. Well, come on then, Pee-wee. You better tell us what you've got.
Well, do you feel it? Do you feel the Earth moving?
Funny you should say that, P-Brain. That's just what I said to Mrs. Sensible when I carry on.
You know that the early part of January is when we go through perihelion?
Yep.
And in particular, we go past periapsis. That's where the Earth is closest to the sun.
Yep.
It's traveling at its fastest orbital speed.
Yep.
And it's negotiating its tightest turn, all while spinning.
You chuffing numbnut. The Earth's orbit is only mildly elliptical, and over a period of 413,000 years, the Milankovitch cycle, it varies between near perfect and a slight ellipse. At its roundest, its most circular, it's 0.0055 out of round, and at its worst, it's 0.6 out of round. The distance the Earth travels as it negotiates one orbit is 940 million kilometres, and over those 940 million kilometres it's got to rotate around the sun once, and you think that that's a sharp turn that it needs to negotiate. Try thinking of scale, dear boy.
So do you feel it? Do you feel this ride we're on? No, of course not. Because it's fictitious.
No, of course not, because there's no change in velocity. Here we are on Concorde, flying at great speed, with no sudden sharp turns, no sudden speeding up and slowing down, and it's nice and comfortable for the people. And at Mach 1, the stewardess has no problem walking around. She doesn't feel the speed. They can happily enjoy their champagne. You don't feel speed. What you feel is changes in velocity, and the Earth in its rotation and its orbit maintains the same speed with a very minor irregularity.
Okay, so let's sit back, relax, and let's break this apart. I want to talk about the motion of the Earth today. Every year, there's a point where the Earth gets closest to the sun, and early January is when that happens. Now, they pin it down to like January 2nd, January 3rd, 4th, something like that. So this is the time of year. So this is where the Earth will reach its maximum orbital speed while simultaneously negotiating the tightest turn, which is periapsis. And that's defined as a pivotal point of directional change in an ellipse.
If you left a dotted line along the path the Earth takes on its orbit, and then you sat above that dotted line and looked along it at this tightest point, it would look perfectly straight to you. The Earth's orbit is not a perfect circle, but as Anthony Riley might say, you could think of it as a perfect circle?
Well, first let me just say that there's two components to the argument of whether or not the Earth is flat or whether or not the Earth's a ball, and it's whether or not there's any motion to the Earth. I want to talk about motion because motion helps corroborate either the ball or the flat Earth.
Actually, you're right. The movement and rotation of the Earth does come into this. It provides the explanation for the rising and the setting of the sun. It provides an explanation for the seasons, and with the tilt of the Earth, how they take effect. It explains why the stars rotate in different directions, north and south of the equator, around 2 circumpolar points. Over a 6-month orbit, 6 months of the Earth's orbit, you can take parallax readings on stars, which demonstrates we are orbiting around the sun. But do carry on, dear boy.
Being that we feel no motion can be detected. As you all know, anybody who's honest, if we say, is there any motion? Do you feel motion to this Earth? Of course not. We never have. But we should.
No, we shouldn't. You only feel the changes. Actually, your picture that you're just showing is exactly what would happen if the Earth varied its speed. The oceans would slop all over the continents.
I mean, we should, in light of the fact that the Earth feels the rotation, right? The Earth is said to be bulging 14 miles high, gazillions and bazillions beyond measurable tons of earth, dirt, rock, water, bulging up at the equator, 14 miles high, and the Earth is said to be flattening at the poles. The centrifugal force generated by the rotation is said to be doing this.
Yes, and we can tell the distance around the equator is slightly longer than the distance circumpolar. Now, you seem to be thinking of the Earth as gazillions, as you put it, gazillions of tons of earth and rock. For the most part, it's molten. It's like a great big ball of gloop with the thin skin on it. Now, if that ball was 1 metre across, the bulge at the equator is about 3 millimetres. Now, I will give you credit for one thing. Unlike that guy who seems to think you'll get a sudden bulge at the equator, your diagram clearly shows that the out of roundness starts right at the pole.
And the bulge is tied to the rotational speed. So the orbit around the sun also would generate a centrifugal force.
Well, the outward force of us rotating in an orbit around the sun is minute, and certainly the effect of gravity will overcome any way you could notice anything.
But where's the Earth distorting features attributed to the orbit? I mean, it also generates a centrifugal force, so you have both centrifugal forces acting at once. So also, the equator, every 12 hours, would have a 2,000 mile per hour fluctuation.
You say what?
So also, the equator, every 12 hours, would have a 2,000 mile per hour fluctuation. And those living on the equator. I mean, that should cause the ground to heave and hoe, especially as the Earth is whipping around, and the equator that's on the outside should be bulging out, and then as it goes to the inside, it would relax, and the ground would just be pulsing in and out.
Secret footage of p-brane trying to negotiate an escalator. Oh yeah. Calm down, you congealed bowl of custard. The Earth, rotating once every 24 hours. The Earth going round the sun once every year. And you think that is whipping around?
Because when you're on the outside, you would be rotating in the orbital direction, and you'd have to add 1,000 miles per hour.
No, p-brane, don't. Just don't go there, please. You're going to look like a chuffing idiot.
When you're on the inside, you're rotating against the orbital direction. You'd have to subtract 1,000 miles per hour. Red alert, red alert, red alert, red alert. That's a 2,000 mile per hour fluctuation every 12 hours, every day of the year.
Right, me old China. We're going to have to show you. You do seem to be getting confused, p-brane. Here is our trusty Earth again. On the other side, I have drawn two p-branes. This Earth is going to rotate at 100 miles an hour. So both p-branes are moving at 100 miles an hour. The one at the top is moving 100 miles an hour to the left, the one at the bottom 100 miles an hour to the right. So what we're going to do now is add orbital velocity, and to keep it simple, flow simple, we'll say that's 100 miles an hour as well. So we'll deduct 100 from 100 on one side of the Earth for one p-brane and add 100 to the 100 on the other. So we get speeds of 0 and 200. And as a reference point, we'll use the end of my nose and we'll watch the p-branes as they go past. So we'll add our orbital speed together with our rotational speed. Watch the p-brane. And as he passes my nose, he virtually stays still. That's our 0. And the other one went at twice the speed. That's our 200. But you haven't thought about this, have you, p-brane? With our two p-branes, if one is going at 200 and the other is going at 0, he's going to catch him up. This is a rigid disk, a sort of flat Earth. Forget that. This is a rigid disk. The two of them are rotating around the centre at exactly the same speed, exactly as we rotate around the centre of the Earth at the same speed. The only thing is that comparing reference frames, the reference frame of the Earth and the end of my nose, is that one p-brane appears to be virtually motionless while the other one appears to be going faster. No speed has changed. At all times we're rotating at 100 miles an hour. You, sir, are an idiot.
You don't believe this is a concept? Well, let's look at how a hurricane operates.
p-brane, are you really going to double down on this? Really?
Okay, a hurricane, you could think of it as a spinning, orbiting Earth. And let's say this storm has 100 mile per hour rotational speed. Well, it also has a linear speed, or the speed that the storm is moving relative to the ground, right? It's forward progress. That speed, let's say, is 20 miles per hour.
Don't do it, p-brane. Think of the children.
On the right-hand side of the storm, you'd have a 120 mile per hour wind, because you have the 100 mile per hour rotation plus the 20 mile per hour speed that the storm is moving. You add those together. Okay, on the left side, the winds are rotating against the orbital direction, if you will. You subtract the 20 mile per hour forward speed of the storm from the 100 mile per hour rotational speed, and you get 80 miles per hour on the left-hand side of the storm.
p-brane, you said it yourself. Your storm is rotating at 100 miles an hour. All the p-branes floating around in the clouds are moving at 100 miles per hour around the central point. However, you've got the tracking speed of the storm. So on one side, the winds would appear to be 120 miles an hour. The other would appear to be 80 miles per hour relative to the ground. QED. Thank you. Now don't forget, I'm after 1 minute debunk videos to be submitted, open to anyone, to be shown on my channel. It can be about flat earth, conspiracy theories, anything like that, as long as it's clean. It's open to anyone, film it on a phone. We're not after fancy graphics, just after something different. Also, I'm looking for a number of creators to provide an episode to be shown on my channel to cover a dry area for me in January. Just contact me, either via Discord in the description or email me, mr-sensible@hotmail.com. Also, most important, don't forget, this Saturday 14th December, 2100 UTC, I've got another live stream with James M. Skipper, ex-senior NASA test engineer for manned and hazardous missions. It should be a cracker, and this time we'll have him on video. I hope you all enjoyed the show. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit notify. Until next time, stay sensible.
Shut up and sit down.